Hi, everybody. This is Kate with Glazers Camera, welcoming you to our continuation of our Glazers Anniversary event. This week, we're focusing on lighting. So we have an awesome speaker this evening, her name is Sandra Coan. She's a local Seattle area photographer who specializes in using film and lighting. She recently became a Westcott Top Pro, and she's going to talk about 3 things you need to know to create natural looking light with strobes and flash. So during this session, she's got a little presentation for us. If you have questions during the session, please feel free to post those in the comments on the YouTube channel or the Facebook page, and we'll do a little bit of Q&A at the end of the session. But before we start, I do want to let you know that if you haven't signed up for the session on our Sketch site through our Glazers Anniversary website, please do so now. There's a special offer that can only go out to people who sign up, and let me tell you, it's really good. So you don't want to miss it. So go sign up immediately. Make sure you've just checked that little box next to the title so that you can get the email that's going to go out at the end of this session. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sandra, who's going to share her tips and tricks on using lighting without being afraid of it and creating just a really amazing natural light. So Sandra, tell us a little bit about you, and then we could dive right into that presentation.
Okay, well, I have a little bit about me here in the presentation.
Of course
as well.
you do.
Of course I do.
Of course you do.
Let me go ahead and share the screen and we'll get right to it.
Fantastic.
So, okay, can you see that all right, Kate?
Yes, yes.
All right, everybody. So 3 things you need to know to create natural looking light with strobes and flash. That's what we're going to do. And as Kate mentioned, I'm Sandra Coan, and I am a Seattle-based photographer. I'm so excited to be here for Glazers too, because Glazers is my store. That's where I go and I buy my film and I buy my lighting equipment and I know everybody. So this feels a little bit like a virtual homecoming in some ways because Glazers are my people. Now, one of the things that I really, really miss in COVID era is not being able to, see the people that I'm speaking to in these presentations and have conversations. So for those of you out there watching, I'm just going to invite you to pick up your phone right now, get on the gram and send me a little note, say hello. As you're watching the little presentation today or have Q&A, let us know. Chat with us, send us a little greeting. If you're feeling particularly sassy, you can take a little selfie and share that. We love seeing that, okay? And tag Glazers while you're at it too. They're gonna wanna see. So here we go. So yeah, like Kate was saying, I'm a Seattle portrait photographer that specializes in maternity and newborn and fine art portraiture. I happen to be a film photographer. So I shoot exclusively with film in my studio, but don't worry, you don't have to be a film photographer to learn my style of lighting or get something from today's presentation. It's just my approach and how I work. Now, in addition to running my studio, I'm also an industry educator. So I speak and teach on a lot of platforms that you're probably familiar with. I also run my own online education platform called Sandra Coan Education, where I teach photographers to create natural looking light with strobes and flash, what we're doing here today. And as of this year, I am an author. I have a brand new book that came out in June that through Rocky Neck Publishers, and I know you can pick it up at Glazers. So next time,
yes, that is in stock at Glazers now. So we were excited to get that in. So yay!
I'm excited to see it. Next time I go in, I'm going to take my picture with it.
Unless we're sold out, but
okay.
which is a good problem to have.
That's
right?
what we'll hope for. But check it out definitely next time you're in Glazers. So I've been doing this photography thing for a really long time. This is actually my 21st year in business. And I started in 1999 the way I think a lot of us do. It was just a side hustle for me. It was something just to bring in a little extra cash. In 1999, I was actually teaching kindergarten for Seattle public schools and just honestly struggling to get by on a teacher's income. And so I started doing photography on the side just to supplement, and it kind of took off, and I've been doing it ever since. Now, I didn't start using artificial light in my work until pretty recently. I mean, it feels recently, like 2011 was when I started using artificial light. So that means that for the first 12 years of my career, I worked exclusively with natural light. And honestly, that was something that I was really proud of. I used to be like super proud of for a long time because natural light is beautiful, and being able to see it and know how to craft an image with it and create with it, I think is part of the superpowers that we have as photographers. I mean, the reality is that not everybody can see light the way that we do. And so being able to work with it was something, like I said, I had a lot of pride in. But the problem with natural light is that it isn't always available, right? Like sometimes it rains. Can I get a little hands up for that for all of us Seattleites, right? Like we know,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
right? And some days are just dark, like even when it's not raining, we have those days here in Seattle where the streetlights never turn off. And that becomes a challenge when your entire job centers around being able to use light. And some conditions are just less than perfect. I know we've probably all been in one of those situations where you've been contracted for a job or you're going on location and you walk in and it's just like the darkest room you've ever seen, or like the tiniest window. And you're just like, how I'm going to make it work. It's really stressful. Right? So then it's like, well, then what do you do? Well, that question, the then what do you do, was always my problem, because when I had great light, when the weather was good and I had perfect conditions, I could create these really beautiful photos. So this is an example of my work circa 2010, like the year before I started working with Strobes and Flash. And of course, these are the kinds of photos that I was sharing on my website and putting on my portfolio, right? These were the kind of images that I wanted to be creating for my clients, like on the regular. But the problem was that as soon as the weather was bad or I was in a low light situation, I really struggled to produce that kind of work, that quality of work. And if you're following along, if you're like resonating with any of this, please let me know. Say me too, yes, because I feel like these are things that we have all struggled with at some point. And for me personally, it really affected my confidence. I remember like just being so stressed out when I would wake up on a dark day knowing I had shoots, and honestly feeling kind of bad or almost feeling like a fraud, like I was lying to people calling myself a professional photographer because I didn't know how to make it work on these really dark days in these bad situations. It of course affected my work. So my clients would come in expecting images like that, and I wasn't able to produce them. And my images looked really different. And because there was that lack of consistency in the look of my photos, that of course affected my brand and my business. Because the clients who were coming to me in July or on a beautiful bright day were getting a different quality of photo than the people who were coming to me in the deep dark days of November. And that was a problem. That's a problem for business. So what it really boiled down to is I just didn't have a contingency plan. I knew exactly what to do when I had light and when the weather was good, but when I didn't, everything fell apart. And so I would do these things like obsessively watch the weather forecast. That was like, I see Kate nodding because right, like we've all been there. And, then I would try to book my sessions around the weather. Well, when you live and work in Seattle, Washington, that's pretty impossible to do, right? So what that meant is that I always ended up with a lot of reschedules that would just back up my calendar, or cancellations, especially during that busy holiday season, because for a portrait photographer, for a family photographer like myself, we get busy in the fall, just as people are coming in for holiday photos. And that's just when the weather gets really, really bad around here. So it was like the worst time for me not to be able to show up and do my job. So to compensate, I'd come up with all these schemes. So there was this trying to schedule around the weather. Well, when that didn't work and I had to shoot anyway, I would grab my digital camera and crank up my ISO, right, as high as it would go. And let me tell you, when those first digital cameras came out, they couldn't go very high and they weren't that great at those speeds. But then I would shoot wide open, right, at like the lowest shutter speed I could possibly handhold at. And it would have varying degrees of success. Now, I have this photo in here because this is a session that I vividly remember. It was one of these super duper duper dark days here in Seattle. And we were trying to do holiday family photos. And it was so dark that I had the mom hold the baby and set the baby up on the windowsill of my studio and like literally press the baby up against the window, which, so we could just get as much light as possible. And I'm shooting wide open and, all the things that I just described. And it worked for this one image, right? We got this beautiful image of the reflection, whatever. But the problem is when it's that dark, and you're already maxed out, your top ISO, and you're shooting as wide open as you possibly can at a 30th of a second or a 60th of a second, it's really hard to then go and photograph a family, right? So at this point, so we take the baby off the window ledge, and then I have to back the family up because I can't put an entire family pressed up against a window, right? That would be really hard and weird. So you back them up and then you're losing 4 to 5 feet, right? So the light's dropping off. So now it's even darker. And it's really hard to photograph a family of 3 or a family of 4 at, f2. Somebody's going to be out of focus, or like one eyeball of the person closest to the camera is going to be in focus and everybody else isn't. And this mom was upset. She acknowledged, she's like, we got some beautiful pictures of the baby, but we didn't get anything of the family, anything that I could use. And obviously that's a horrible email to get. I felt terrible and ended up giving her a refund. So things like that were always happening to me. So then I thought, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll just take them outside. So I'll do the family photos inside and then I'll take them outside. Well, fun fact, my studio is a storefront studio. You can probably hear traffic going by right now. I'm right on a busy street. So it's not like you walk outside and it's pretty. It's not. There's like a taco shop across the street and a pot store next door. So it's not where you want to be doing your family photos, right? So instead I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll just start taking families into the back alleyway to do photos, which is where we took this photo. And you guys, this is what that back alleyway looks like in the wintertime. So again, not ideal for family photos. So these were the kinds of problems that I was having, and these were the kinds of solutions I was coming up with, which weren't great. And then this all really became a problem when I started shooting film. Because again, when I had plenty of light, I could get gorgeous photos, these beautiful airy photos that I really wanted to take my brand to. That was the direction I wanted to go. But once I didn't have light, all those problems I just described got 10 times worse, because when you're shooting film, you can't just crank your ISO up to 6400. You're stuck at an ISO and it's usually 400, maybe 800. You just have a lot of built-in limitations. So I had this one session come in, newborn session with this mom, November, and photographed the whole session on film because that's where I was taking my brand and I thought I was doing all the things that I could do. Well, the film came back horribly underexposed. Unexposed film, for those of you who don't know, is not pretty. You get these crazy color shifts, this giant green. And so this is what their images look like, which are just not acceptable. Nobody wants an orange baby, just like collapsed blacks. It was terrible. And so I had to call this mom and again, apologize. And like, we didn't get a usable image from the whole session. It was just devastating. But this was the session that made me get over myself. So this is the one when I was like, I'm done feeling like a fraud. I'm done producing work that I know isn't good and then just sending it to my clients and hoping and praying they don't say anything back, and I'm done losing those clients and money just due to poor quality that's all controlled by the weather. So that's when I knew I had to tackle my fear and get out of my own way and just learn to create my own light. And you guys, in that moment, literally everything changed in my business. So you saw this timeline, right? Well, what I didn't show you about this story is that in 2012 was the year I had my first 6-figure year. And that was no accident. That happened in large part because that was also the year where I wasn't trying to schedule around the weather. I could now schedule around what worked for me and what worked for my clients. I wasn't rescheduling or canceling sessions in the height of my holiday rush. I wasn't having to refund anybody because of poor quality. So there was a lot of business benefits that this one little skill had for my business. But more importantly, this was the first year that I felt confident every time I picked up the camera. And I felt really proud of all the work that I was giving. And when you bring that kind of attitude into your business, that makes a difference too. And so I always tell people that learning to create strobes and flash, the one little skill that allowed me to take my business to the level that I needed it to go to support myself and my family. So looking at this timeline, you might be asking yourself, I know I do, if that's the case, if this one little thing was so powerful, why did I let myself struggle for 12 years before learning to tackle it and just learning how to do it? And the truth is, as a natural light photographer, I believed in a lot of myths and a lot of misconceptions that I think so many of us do. And so I just want to look at two of the probably biggest myths that I see people struggling with when it comes to artificial lighting, and then we'll get into the whole method. So myth number one is that artificial light is ugly. So just raise your hand if you've ever felt this or believed this. All right. And let's be honest, it can be. You know, we've all seen that where you have the blown highlights and the hot spots and that harsh, flashy look, right? Or you have just too much light. And if you're a natural light photographer, you know, a lot of us love like shooting wide open and having that kind of airy feel. And when you have too much light, when you're just blasted with strobe light or flashlight, then you have to shoot it like f8 or f11. And for me, I was worried that that was going to produce a look that was outdated, those kind of outdated looking images like this. So obviously this is a joke photo, but I like sharing this image because this is kind of what a lot of us think of when we think of, you know, certainly studio lighting, right? Or using strobes and flash. And this is what I thought. But the reality is that artificial light can look just as soft and just as natural and just as beautiful as window light. So these are examples of images that I took inside of my studio using strobes, and it looks super soft and beautiful and just like window light. This one is also taken with a strobe, and these were taken with a speed light flash. But they still have that light, airy feel that, you know, I get when I'm working with windows. And unlike natural light, artificial light is always available, and it's always consistent, and it's always exactly the way you want it to be, which is huge. So if you want it to be light and airy, if that's the look you like, you can make it. And if you want something a little more dramatic, you can make it too. But the difference is that you get to decide how your work looks, not the weather. And for me, this was huge. I realized when I started learning to use artificial light that so much of my career had just been reacting to whatever was being thrown at me. And I think a lot of us get into that. We're good at that, you know, but it's so different when you can stop reacting and start intentionally creating. You know, what it will do to up-level your work. And like I said, your branding, your business, it's just huge. So myth number two is that lighting is hard. And again, just raise your hand in the chat, say yes, if this is something that you've ever felt or you think. So this was a big one for me because I'm a self-taught photographer and artificial light just didn't seem intuitive, right? It seemed hard and complicated. And it didn't help that every time I would go to look up a tutorial, it seemed way too complicated. You know, like you get on the YouTube or whatever, and it's all these people with these massive setups, and, you know, they're all in these big warehouse studios with assistants everywhere. And I was like, that is not how I shoot. And that is not how I'm interested in shooting at all. It was really just overwhelming to me. What I've since learned, however, is that feeling of overwhelm that used to come was really just about the fear of the unknown. And here's the best part. The truth is, you actually already know most of what you need to know to work with artificial lighting. And that's just because light is light. So if you can work with the sun shining through a window, you can totally work with a bulb shining through a softbox. The same rules apply. All right. And so that's actually where we're going to get started today. So the whole purpose of this talk is just to go over some of the basic things that you already know about working with natural light, working with window light in particular, and showing you how you can apply that directly to working with a strobe or a flash to get the same results. All right. So creating the natural light look, here we go. So what do I mean by the natural light look, first of all, right? Because let's be honest, that can be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. right? So I'll define it for myself and I'll let you define it for you. But when I started working with strobes and flash, my goal was really simple. I wasn't trying to be a big fashion photographer or work in a huge warehouse studio space with tons of assistants. I never in my wildest dream imagined that I would ever be like here teaching other people how to do it or like a Westcott Top Pro, like at all. All I wanted was consistency. That's all I wanted. I just wanted a system that would help me consistently recreate the look I get when working with windows on a perfect day. That's all I wanted. So for me, that natural light look, when I say crafting the natural light look, I'm talking about creating that beautiful north light look, you know, that ideal Irving Penn north light, right? Like that's what we all want. So that light that's really soft and big. I wanted to be able to still work the way that I was used to working, which meant shooting wide open when I wanted to. I love a really beautiful shallow depth of field, and I wanted to be able to do that with strobes and flash as well. I wanted to get those big chunky catch lights that I was used to getting with the windows in my studio and those really soft shadows. So that's what it means to me when I think of the natural light look. But the good thing is, and the exciting thing is that natural looking light can be totally different for you. And that's fine. Like maybe you like something a little more contrasty or a little harder. It doesn't matter. Everything that I'm going to teach you in today's presentation can apply to however you want your natural light to look. Okay. So I just wanted to say that off the bat. So you don't have to be a mini me. So the three things you need to know to create that natural light look, whatever that means for you, is this. You need to understand basic power of your lights and your strobes, the shape of the light, the modifiers you're using and how that's going to affect your look, and the distance, how close and how far and all that kind of stuff. Let's get into it. Starting with the power of your light. This one's really simple. So when you're thinking of the power of your light, like when you're using a strobe or you're using a flash and you're trying to figure out where to set it, the first thing you want to do is you just want to ask yourself this question. How do you like to shoot? Do you like to shoot wide open? Like I was just saying, I love shooting wide open. I'm always at f2 or 2.8, especially when I'm just working with babies because I like that softness. Well, if you like to shoot wide open, then of course you're going to want the power on your strobe to be low, right? That seems pretty easy. And if you want a deeper depth of field, either you like that look or maybe like here I was working with a party of 6, so I'm not going to shoot this at f2. Then you just turn the power of your strobe out. And you guys, believe me, it is really that simple. And then people say, okay, great, Sandra, but like, how do you know where to turn your power to? Oh, see, I just said it. You just meter. So this is where you get yourself a good handheld light meter and you meter. And so what you want to do is you determine what you want your aperture to be based on the look that you're wanting to create, whatever that is for you. And you meter and then just adjust the power in your light until you get there. Easy peasy, right? Strobes and flash are not hard and they're not scary. Now, people always ask me this, what are my go-to settings? I will share that with you, but it doesn't mean they're going to be yours. When I'm shooting film, this image was shot on Portra 400. I like to meter until I get an f4 in the shadows. And there's a whole reason why you meter for your shadows with film that I won't get into. It's not a film class, but I meter until I'm at f4 in the shadows with film. And when I'm shooting with a digital camera, I like to always have my ISO set to 100 and I meter and I'll adjust my light until I get a 2.8 in the highlights. If I'm working with a family, obviously I'll bump that up a little bit, but those are my usual go-to settings and where I'm trying to adjust. Now let's talk about the shape of your light. This is something that comes up all the time because if you've ever walked into a lighting store like lasers and gone upstairs to where all the lighting equipment is, it can be a little overwhelming, right? There's like every size and shape of modifier known to man, and it can freak you out. So when you're looking at lighting, when you're starting to invest in getting equipment, knowing how the shape of your light is going to affect your light is also just a really good, some good information to have. So when thinking about the shape of your light, looking at modifiers, start thinking about what you already know about window light, right? Which is the size and the shape of your window will have an effect on the look of your light, right? We all know this. So if you have a big window, for example, let's say you're at the Fairmont downtown or something, and they have those big, beautiful windows, and you stand your bride in front of those windows. Well, that light's going to come in and just wrap all around. It's going to create this big, soft light, right? With these really nice diffuse shadows. That's what big windows do. And small windows, like if you have, like those little tiny windows on the front of a door that you look at to see who's knocking or whatever, right? And they create these like little beams of light. That little beam of light is going to come in. It's going to create harder light and a harder shadow. Well, the same rules apply to modifiers. So a big modifier is going to create soft diffuse shadows, just like a big window will. And a small modifier is going to create sharp defined shadows, just like a small window will. So you already know this stuff. So there you can see the difference. These were taken in the exact same room, the same light. We just switched out modifiers. Large modifier relative to my subject, small modifier relative to my subject. And you can see the difference there, right? Now, the shape of your modifier is also going to affect the catch lights, the look of the catch lights that you get in your image. And so that's something you're going to want to know too, depending on the look you're trying to create. So the general rule is square modifiers or modifiers with a straight edge, like a big octodome or something, are going to create a more square looking catch light, whereas a round modifier is going to create a round catch light. So good to know. Like, if you're wanting to really recreate that window light look, then maybe you're going to want something that creates a square catch light. Or if you're outside and you're wanting to recreate something that looks like the sun, maybe a round catch light, a round modifier is the right choice for you. Now, the bigger your modifier relative to your subject, the bigger the catch light's going to be. So I actually use a round modifier now because I'm obsessed with the Westcott parabolic umbrellas. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. But because they're so big, 7-foot parabolic compared to a tiny baby, I'm still getting this big catch light that wraps around the eye that looks very similar to the catch lights I get when working with the window light in my studio. So things that you want to know. And I just threw this baby in because I'm obsessed with that baby's thighs. So that's just bonus, baby. You're welcome. So the last thing you want to think about when you're first getting started with strobes and flash, wanting to create this natural light look, is the distance of your light. And this is something people struggle with too. It's like, how close do you have it to your subject? How high do you want it? All of those things. So let's talk about that. So again, what do we know about window light? It's always good to start there. Well, we know that the closer you are to the window, the bigger that light source seems. So if you have a window in a room and you're on the other side of the room, that window looks smaller than it does when you're right up close to it. We all know this, right? And we know that the closer you are, the brighter the light is, right? And the closer you are, the softer that light is. We just talked about that with that bride analogy that we said earlier. And of course, the opposite is true as well, right? The further you are away, the smaller the light source. The further you are away, the dimmer the light is, and the harder the light is. Okay. Well, again, the same rules apply when working with artificial light. Light is light. So when you're trying to determine where you're going to place your light, you have to ask yourself, what kind of light are you trying to create? Again, what is your version of ideal light? What does that natural light look for you? For me, I'm wanting that big, soft north light look, right? So I'm going to bring my modifier in closer because I know that the closer that modifier is, that the bigger the light source, the bigger the modifier is, the softer the light, right? I also know it's going to be brighter though when I bring it in. And that's why turning down the power, like we talked about before, is really important, and making sure you're using your meter so that you know exactly where to set your power to. So bringing that in close is one of the ways I get that really pretty soft light. So here's a pullback of what my basic setup looks like. This is the 7-foot parabolic umbrella, Westcott 7-foot parabolic umbrella. That's a mouthful. And then I put a diffusion panel on it too. And so I create this just big giant ball of light essentially in my studio. But you can see how I've just got that really close to that baby. And when I was writing the book, I actually got a tape measure and I started measuring every client that came in just to see, because I was like, how close do I get that? And I probably, most of the time I'm about 3 feet away from my subject with my light, but that's how I get that really pretty big soft light that I create. So how do I produce my natural light look? I'm going to just recap it. First of all, turn down the power on my strobes. Remember, I'm always metering to make sure I'm reaching my desired aperture. It's going to be a different setting for everybody. So make sure you're metering. I use really big modifiers relative to my subject whenever I can. And I bring that light in really close, right? Now, I also want you to remember, however, that the power and the distance of your light are going to affect the brightness of your light. And this is really important. We can get into all like inverse square law stuff, but nobody wants to talk about that. Just know that the closer it is, the brighter it's going to be. So be sure you're using that meter. That big light modifiers create that pretty soft diffuse shadows, and small modifiers do those hard defined shadows, and that the shape of your modifier is going to affect your catch lights. All right. So think about those things though, when you're going in to create your light. So that's my recipe. If you wanted to create maybe a harder light look, or a little more dramatic look, then you could go for a smaller modifier. You could pull that modifier farther away from your subject, right? You could maybe turn the power up a little bit. So you're shooting, a little more stop down, like 5/6 or f8 or whatever. But that's how you start like playing around with those things to start creating whatever you want to create. So keeping those things in mind are going to help you create your ideal version. Okay. Now I'm going to get into equipment for just a second, because this is like a bonus myth where people are like, I can't get started with strobes and flash because equipment's so expensive. And I want to talk about that. So we're going to do that. I am going to be taking Q&A on all this in just a few minutes. And so if you have a question or something that popped up while we were watching, just go ahead and type it in the chat. And Kate's going to keep an eye on those. But let's just talk about equipment for a second, because like I said, this is the bonus myth, right? So the myths are, lighting's too hard, it's not pretty, and the lighting is too expensive. So let's just talk about that. This one I totally get. This was a huge pain point of mine for years, right? I get it. You run a small business. This year in particular, things have been really hard. Our industry's been hit particularly hard by everything. Money is tight. And the last thing you want to do is invest in a bunch of gear that you are never going to use, right? And we've all done it, and it never feels good. But the reality is you actually don't need a ton of gear to get started with strobes and flash. So everything I do in my studio, even when I'm working with families, 6, 7 people, everything I do with one stand, one strobe or flash unit. I'm a strobe, but you can use a flash unit, a radio trigger and receiver, just so your camera can communicate with your light, a light modifier, and a light meter. That's it. That's my whole setup right there. You can take it with you on location. It's easy to pack up, and it's not that expensive. And this is one of the reasons why I'm such a huge Westcott fan, you guys. Now, Kate and I actually were talking before we went on air about how we love Westcott. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Westcott pro. I invested in Westcott. It was the first equipment I actually ever purchased when I got started with strobes and flash. And I had the Apollo 50 by 50 softbox, right? And I bought it because it's the shape of a window. So in my brain, I was like, it's just a window, it's nothing to be afraid of. And that's kind of how I got over it. But the great thing about Westcott gear, and one of the reasons why I love it so much, and I'm so proud to now be able to represent them, is that it's a really good quality. It really is. I mean, my stuff has lasted forever, and it's beautiful. It creates this beautiful light. And it's really affordable. And now that they've brought the Westcott FJ400, which is their strobe unit on, you can get a whole setup for easily under $1,000 or even less, right? The Westcott 7-foot parabolic that I use all the time is $99. It's like they're giving it away. So they're a great company and great brand. And the whole takeaway is you really can get started even if you're on a budget. I mean, am I right, Kate? I can see you back there nodding. It's just fun.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, I don't want to
just
so Brandon can attest to this. Brandon works with Westcott. I have an Apollo 28-inch softbox that is like 10 years old. That for many years he was making fun of me for using, because I was like, well, when it breaks, I'll buy a new one, but it hasn't broken down on me.
It hasn't broken, so what are you gonna do?
Yeah. So yeah.
I still have my 50 by 50
nice.
that I use every once in a while too. It's still back there. So the takeaway is this, you guys. This is what I'm hoping you're getting from today, is that light is light. All right. you already know most of the hard stuff. You can already see it and you know how to work with it. So bringing in a strobe or a flash is just giving yourself one more tool in your tool belt, right? Remember that the power and the distance of your light is going to affect the brightness and softness of it. The big modifiers are going to give you that pretty soft light, and that small modifiers are going to give you harder light. And that the shape and the distance of your modifier is going to affect your catch lights. I mean, really, that's the bare bones of what you need to know. Learning to use lighting, like I showed you in my little timeline at the beginning, really was a turning point for me in my career. It helped me create my signature style. It helped me build my brand. It really helped me develop my look that allowed me to stand out in a very saturated market, as Seattle is, and build the studio business that I have today. And honestly, build the education and business that I have today, because I obviously wouldn't be here talking to you today if I had never gotten started with strobes and flash. Most importantly, it's given me confidence that I didn't have when I was a natural light photographer. I feel like now my work is on my terms. I know exactly what I'm going to create. I know exactly how my images are going to look. And I am 100% confident that every client who walks through my door is going to get the quality of images that they deserve to get, because they're paying me. That's our job as professionals, right? So if I want to use my windows and I'm seeing pretty light, I'm inspired, I can do that. But if that light's not available, or I'm choosing to use light that I'm creating, I can do that too. And those images still match and it's still on brand for me. And that's makes all the difference. So if you take one thing away from today, I want it to be this: don't let something as silly as bad lighting or November keep you from sharing your gift with the world. Okay. You owe it to yourself and you owe it to your clients to be able to consistently produce beautiful work, regardless of the weather or the windows or the available light in the room. And you deserve to feel confident every time you pick up the camera. All right. So thank you for being with me today. I just zoomed through that. I'm a fast talker. Don't forget to send me a little note on the gram if you have any, just want to say hey, and that was fun. And let's open it up to Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing my screen if that's cool.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that way they can see your face.
Yay. In my little office studio.
No, it's all right. It's all good. So yeah, if you guys who are tuning in have questions, please feel free to post those in the comments on Facebook or on YouTube, and we'll do a little Q&A here. And just a quick reminder that there is a special deal to be had. That FJ400 that she was talking about is less than $600. So if you're worried about like breaking the bank or anything like that, you can start with one light for less than $600. And it's a fantastic light. I recently have been able to add that to my kit that I use for my own portrait work. And it's just fantastic and reliable, great to take on location, like she was talking about, like all those things.
Yeah, so, it's not very big.
No, it's, and I have the backpack kit, so I can throw other stuff in there, like my cameras and some smaller modifiers. And, and we shoot very differently. Like my work's way more dramatic. I'm the small modifier person. My biggest modifier is not the 7-foot parabolic, but it is really awesome. I have owned it.
Yay.
So Sandra, could you talk a little bit about your light meter? Are you using like a Sekonic light meter maybe?
I am. I'm just looking around for it, but it's in the other room. But yeah, I just use a Sekonic, the L358, which is super old. I've had mine since 2002.
There's an updated version though that's pretty reasonably priced. I think it's like $250 or something like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a really good price.
Yeah.
And I know that I've seen them used at Glazers too. Like they come in used all the time. Like I recommend any of the Sekonics. I think they're fantastic.
Yeah. And I would second that. I've used those off and on for longer than I care to admit.
Well, yeah. But I think like the metering piece is so important. And I stress it because I know, especially in the digital age, people think that knowing how to use a handheld light meter is just an extra piece of equipment you don't need. But it really does, like, it just helps like nail that consistency. I mean, I work with little kids, and no little kid has 15 minutes to wait while their photographer's like fussing and checking the back of their camera and adjusting their light. Like you just go and you do it once, boom, you're done. It's
right. And it definitely helps.
Oh yeah.
I'm of the camp of, I also like, I'll do a lighting test before the client even gets there just to make sure I have it dialed in. And then there might be a slight tweak when they arrive because of skin tone or whatever, or maybe their outfit. But normally, and I'm sure you're doing that too. So, you said you're taking your kit on location some?
Sometimes, yeah.
Do you ever blend like available light and the strobe to kind of enhance? So someone's asking about creating a more natural lit look on location where you're maybe blending that light.
Well, fun fact, I do that every day because my studio, what you don't know is storefront. So it's like all windows, south facing windows. So I'm always blending my light, which again is one of the reasons why it's so important to meter, to make sure that you're getting a good balance of ambient light and strobe light. So you're not getting any ghosting or anything like that.
Yeah, totally.
So what I would say, if you're going on location, you're working in a situation where you're blending strobe light and ambient light, is get yourself a meter and just make sure that you're always at least one stop over the natural light. So you don't get that ghosting.
That's very specific. I like that.
I know. Just because I used to have that problem all the time.
Yeah. Have you ever, so I know you work with families mostly. Have you ever worked with dancers or anything like that where you might be using high-speed sync? Have you explored any of the high-speed sync, especially since you do like to shoot wide open?
Yeah. You know what? I haven't. And I think part of that is just because of the cameras that I use.
Right. Because you're using the Hasselblad film cameras.
Yeah.
And all
so I
that.
use a Hasselblad and a Rolleiflex.
Yeah.
And my Rolleiflex is from like the 1950s and they did not have high speed sync.
No.
So,
but that would definitely be an option with the FJ400 system. It's just about making sure the remote that you can get and your camera are set up to talk to each other properly. So it's totally an option with that system.
Yeah. But I have worked with dancers, like, especially when I was writing the book, I tried to get a lot of different kinds of people in and locations in, and we had some super fun, crazy shoots, and and then also I work with kids, right, who are always jumping and always doing crazy things. So I'm used to movement.
Oh, of course. Okay.
Yeah.
So Derek is asking, do you do a 5 or 10 degree spot? So I think he's meaning, he's saying to analyze highlights and shadows.
Oh, do I? Well, yeah. Okay. So I talk about this in the book too. So again, I shoot film, right? So I'm always metering for the shadow. Yeah. But I always, even when I'm shooting film or shooting digital, I'll do a quick highlight and a shadow reading really quick to make sure I don't want more than a 3-stop difference. Yeah. Just because I like that really pretty soft shadow. Right. And it gets too contrasty, especially with film. It can look weird. So yeah.
Too heavy, especially with the shadows, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. Okay, you guys, do you have any more questions? Keep them coming. We we may wrap this early if you guys have more questions.
That's why it's good when I'm live, because then I can stop and talk with people.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, it's totally a different experience to be doing these things on the internet. So
I know it's kind of fun though. We'll all get used to it just as things are getting back to normal.
I know. Well, I think we're ready to do some in-person stuff. And I know that I actually did my first in-person photo walk this past weekend, but that's another story. So all right. So what I'd love to do is, first of all, I want to thank Sandra for your time and all of that great information. It's always good to get those refreshers from me because I shoot very differently than you do. Mm-hmm. So it's really good to think about using that more as the window light to recreate the window light. But it's definitely a thing I talk about when, talking, because I also teach lighting, but like I said, my approach is a little bit different. But you can't just shoot in December in Seattle with natural light. Like it's too unreliable. So it's a great opportunity to think about like how you can up your game, up your business and all of that good stuff. So all of this information is super, super helpful. So thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you, Westcott, for letting you present on our anniversary event and kicking off our lighting week. So how awesome is that?
That's so exciting. Yeah. And if people want to know more, grab the book, go into Glazers and look through it, because I have a detailed information in there on metering, detailed information for both digital and film photographers. So, and lots of pretty pictures of my Westcott setup. So
nice. And like I said, if you did sign up for this session, you're going to receive an email shortly after the session wraps with a special offer that's only available during the lighting week period. So look at the date, look at the offer. I mean, I got to tell you, it's really good.
It's really good.
I'm excited for you guys that get to take advantage of this offer, because I don't get to take advantage of this offer because some of the stuff I actually already own, but it's a really, really good deal for you guys. So check your email. Don't be afraid of the light. We got you. You can learn it. It's
If
easy.
you can do it with the window, you can do it with lights.
Exactly. So, all right. They're getting lots of thank yous, lots of great information, lots of encouragement, so feedback from folks. So like she said, go follow Sandra and chat with her on Instagram too. She'd love to hear from you.
I would.
And for all of you guys tuning in, this is just the beginning of Lighting Week. We have events happening tomorrow and Wednesday. One from yours truly, I'll be doing a different kind of lighting demo, going the opposite spectrum of Sandra's work and talking more about dramatic lighting. So check the schedule, glazerscamera.com/anniversary, see what's coming up the rest of this week. And guess what? That programming doesn't just happen this week. We've got programming going through October 17th. With special offers happening throughout that time. So check it out, sign up to be sure to get those emails with all those special deals. Thank you all for tuning in. Sandra, Brandon hanging out in the background. Thank you so much for being here. It's really great to finally have you do something with us.
I know.
I've been here, we've been talking about this and it finally happened. So yay. Thank you again. Everybody enjoy your evening and have a great night.